Today, almost every country in the world is drowning in debt. The United States owes more than $38 trillion. The European Union owes more than $14 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. And what about the so-called oil kingdoms? Their situation is no different. The total global debt has now exceeded $315 trillion, which means it is now 3 times the size of the entire world economy. So who owns this massive web of debt? If everyone is in debt, then the real question is this: who is all this debt being paid to? The origin of national debt began with war. In 1694, while England was at war with France, the nation ran out of gold reserves. To secure funding, the government sat down with merchants and struck a deal. In exchange for loans, they offered interest payments, guaranteed by future taxes collected from the public. This agreement gave birth to a new institution, the Bank of England. For the first time, the state realized it could spend money it did not yet have. And this is how the modern debt system, which still shapes our world today, was born. But how did this system turn into a source of power? How did indebted nations become indifferent to the well-being of their own people? And how did these debts transform into a measure of strength for the creditor nations? America's debt is not just an issue for U.S. citizens. It affects the entire world. Of the $38 trillion in debt, a significant portion is held by American banks, investment funds, and the Federal Reserve. Nearly $9 trillion of that debt, however, sits in the hands of foreign countries. The largest foreign holders are Japan and China. But the debt owed specifically to China makes up only about 2% of the total. So who is the United States really indebted to? The answer is simple: its own system. But how does this internal debt relationship end up spreading across other nations? How did countries, if you've noticed, become borrowers of one another? Today's global system is a network of mutual dependence between nations. Japan buys U.S. Treasury bonds. The United States provides loans to other countries through the IMF. Europe channels funds to developing economies using the resources of the World Bank. And those same developing nations reinvest the foreign currency they collect back into U.S. and European bonds. The result: every country is essentially indebted to another on paper. So who controls this cycle? Which powers are determining the fate of nations? In reality, the system is clear: hedge funds, pension funds, asset management companies. These massive institutions control trillions of dollars, and they decide how much each country can borrow, and which nations can comfortably pay high interest rates. When payments to these institutions are delayed, or worse, when confidence begins to fracture, markets can flip upside down instantly. Currency collapses cripple governments, and entire economies can be brought to their knees. Democracies choose their leaders through elections, but how do the markets decide which governments get to stay standing? This is precisely where central banks step in. Central banks don't just manage debt, they create it. When they purchase government bonds, they generate new money. A government's debt essentially becomes another government's asset. In the modern economy, there is almost no money that isn't backed by debt. So the real question is, can states ever pay this debt back? Or do they even plan to? And do you believe this web of intergovernmental debt will ever truly be settled? Governments do not actually pay off their debt. The system is the same as it was years ago. New debt is taken on to pay off old debt. Economists call this system refinancing. For example, Japan's debt has exceeded 250% of its GDP. Yet why isn't Japan in crisis? Because investors are no longer focused on the principle. They have embraced the continuation of the system itself. So, do you think this system could break? And what happens if confidence is lost? When Greece was unable to pay its debts in the 2010s, the markets plunged into panic. Argentina has fallen into default multiple times. Sri Lanka's economy collapsed due to a shortage of foreign currency. The creditors become visible only during moments of crisis. The IMF, investors, credit rating agencies. So who truly benefits when the system is functioning? Whom does debt really serve within society? In the debt cycle, interest payments flow from the lower segments of society toward the upper ones, from taxpayers to investors, from workers to financial institutions. That's why the larger the debt grows, the more inequality begins to deepen. So what role does the debt system play in today's world? Is debt merely a burden, or is it the central pillar of the global system? Debt is, in fact, a hidden system in the modern world. It is neither entirely good nor entirely bad. What holds the economy together is trust, a system built on the promise to repay, one that creates interconnectedness and cooperation among nations. But let's not forget, debt is ultimately a promise that must be paid back, and no promise can be postponed forever. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and leave a comment for more content on history, economics, and the world order. See you in the next episode.